Hi everyone, and welcome to another reading vlog. This reading vlog is extra special though because it is going to be dedicated to finally reading the first book in the Bridgerton series, also known as The Duke and I. Now, if you followed me on Instagram or Twitter sometime during January, then you probably know that I was obsessed with the Bridgerton TV series, which was on Netflix, and followed the events of this first book. I have not been addicted to a TV series like Bridgerton in quite some time, and honestly, it's a feeling that I missed. I liked being able to just binge watch a TV show. So obviously, not wanting to have to wait a whole year for season 2 and just wanting to spend more time with these characters, I thought the next best thing to do would be to read the book series. So I went out to Barnes & Noble, I bought this edition specifically, I sought it out. It was hard to find because I'll be darned if any of the other editions ever end up on my bookshelves because they are just not it. But that was back in January. It is now April and I'm just finally getting around to reading this book because frankly I took a look at the Goodreads ratings after buying this book and realized that this is not quite as beloved as the TV series. So some of the reviews on Goodreads was like 5 stars, super lovable characters, very addictive, super entertaining, everything that one would enjoy about the TV show. The other reviews, however, were 1-star ratings, the writing is horrible, the characters are awful, and it's also problematic. So I thought the only way I'm going to find out is if I read it myself, so the time has finally come. And if you're wondering why you keep switching angles, it's because my arms keep getting tired, so I keep switching back and forth to give the other one a rest. Also, I should just forewarn you, the changing of the seasons is happening here, and with that comes like allergy-like symptoms. So if my nose looks red, dry, or kind of like it's flaking off, that's because it is. So sorry that you have to witness that. But without further ado, let's jump into The Duke and I. So it is now several hours later and I have only now just reached chapter 3 in this book because the writing, the characters, the plot are definitely not gripping me right off the bat quite like the TV show did. But I also realized that I don't think I gave you a synopsis of this book as to what it is about because I think I just kind of assumed that anybody clicking on this video has probably already watched the TV show and or read the book. But just in case you haven't, The Duke and I is the first book in a historical romance series. I believe it is made up of 8 books and each one follows a different Bridgerton sibling, and they are all alphabetically named. So there is Anthony, who is the oldest one, and then Benedict, Colin, Daphne, Eloise, the one I can't remember, the other one I can't remember, and then Hyacinth is the youngest one. But in this book, we're specifically following Daphne, who is the oldest daughter, and she has, like, just come of age to finally be able to be married off. And then we're also kind of following this fella here, who is called Simon, and he is the Duke of Hastings, and he's also a very good friend of Daphne's oldest brother, Anthony, and just by the cover, you can probably guess where this story goes. Another, like, large aspect of this story, or at least it was in the TV show, is that there is this writer called Lady Whistledown who basically writes gossip in the newspaper about all of the, like, families that live in the area, and the Bridgertons are often some of the people talked about in this gossip, and so it was kind of a big part of the TV show that Eloise specifically was trying to figure out who Lady Whistledown was. But as of in this book, she's not like super talked about, but there is like a little paragraph of her writing at the start of each one of the chapters. So yeah, like I said, I'm not super like gripped by the story just 3 chapters in, which I didn't expect to be. But also, with how much I enjoyed the TV show, I guess you could say that I do kind of have high expectations going into this book. But as of right now, as far as just the writing, it does almost feel a little bit fan fiction-y. I don't really know how to explain my thoughts behind that feeling, but that's how it feels. But just in this last chapter, these 2 characters have met, so I'm hoping now the, like, cutesy, romancy feelings will start to ensue. And also, it's only chapter 3, and Daphne has already thrown her 3rd punch in this book. So, I mean, if that's any indication of what's going to happen in this book. And now that I've explained to you what this book is about for anybody who hasn't read or watched the show, it would probably be a good time to tell you that there's a good chance this reading vlog will include spoilers. So you will be warned before it happens, but I'm just saying. So I have just reached chapter 5 of Bridgerton. I'm just shy of 100 pages. Is this reflection just way too much. Is this better? It's not better for the way that I look, but it might be better for the distraction purposes. Anyways, I've reached chapter 5 of Bridgerton. I'm just shy of 100 pages, as I already said, and I wish I could come here and tell you something more interesting about my thoughts, but frankly, the best word I could use to describe my feelings towards this book is that I'm just indifferent. Like, I'm not particularly enjoying what I'm reading, but I'm also not hating it by any means, and frankly, I can't even say that I could pinpoint anything that is necessarily bad about this book. I'm just not super, into it, which is really unfortunate because I was so into the TV show right off the bat. And I do feel like maybe the reason I'm not super into this and I'm kind of struggling a little bit with the characters is because my memory of the TV show just isn't what it used to be. I remember my fondness for the TV show, but I can't say I super remember everybody's faces and their voices and stuff like that. And there are a lot of characters in this book. I mean, even just in the Bridgerton family alone, you've got 8 characters, 9 if you're including the mom, and then you've got Simon, and then you've got these other families like the Featheringtons and all of that. So there's honestly a lot of characters to keep track of, and even I remember the first couple of episodes of Bridgerton, Daphne's older 3 brothers, which at this point are the only other siblings that we've been introduced to thus far. I had such a hard time telling them apart during the first few episodes because they actually casted those parts really well. You could definitely tell that they would be playing brothers. Unlike Daphne, which first of all, in this book, it's a thing that all of the Bridgerton siblings look super similar. They all have the same hair color and the same bone structure. And in the TV show, then you've just got Daphne, who's just a redhead, just to throw the redhead in there. So yeah, but in the TV show I had such a hard time telling the 3 older brothers apart, and I mean by the time I got into it, then I could totally tell them apart, and Anthony may or may not have been my favorite, but yeah, I'm kind of struggling to place all of their faces and their voices and stuff like that. So what I'm going to do to try and help myself, which may hinder my enjoyment of the book, I'm not sure, but I think I'm going to really, set the scene tonight. I'm going to change into some cozy pajamas. I'm going to make myself a cup of coffee. Maybe I'll light a candle. And I'm going to try and rewatch the first episode of Bridgerton. Just to, re-familiarize myself with these characters to see if that will help me at all with picking up this book. Is it an excuse just to watch the show again? Possibly. Will it hinder my reading of this book? Also a possibility, but at this point I'm not really enjoying it that much anyway, so what do I have to lose? So that is what I'm going to do tonight, and we'll see how it goes. If I did have to give another critique of this book, if I'm trying to just find things to talk about, then I would say that this author is trying very hard to make this book humorous, and as of right now, it might get better, I don't know, but as of right now, all of the humor is just falling flat for me, which was really unfortunate because I was really looking forward to the first scene between Simon and Daphne, which was just pure banter, but watching it, I remember it being a lot more charming and endearing, as well as honestly the whole thing is banter. Even in the book, all that they do is have these funny bantery conversations with each other, whether it's between the siblings or the love interests and so on and so forth. And like I said, in the TV show, it's really charming and endearing and so on and so forth, whereas in this book, it's just kind of falling flat for me, and I'm not really getting the funniness of it. So, I can tell where it's trying to be funny, but it's just not quite making it there. So we'll see what happens. I'm gonna just go have a cup of coffee and change into PJs and watch Bridgerton as of right now. I'm thoroughly looking forward to it, I'm not gonna lie. It is now the next day. I am 125 pages into The Duke and I. I didn't get very far last night or this morning because I did end up watching the first, like, 3/4 of the first Bridgerton episode, and then today I went on an unexpected adventure that involved reuniting a little 1-month-old kitten that had been separated from its mom, but they are back together now, and it was a very happy ending to that story. But I am very excited to be reading basically all afternoon because I'm happy to say that I think watching the first episode of Bridgerton and just refamiliarizing myself with the characters actually helps me enjoy this a little bit more. I'm still not loving it by any means, but I am definitely enjoying it more, and I feel more inclined to pick the book up whenever I put it down. It's kind of funny, I feel like this book TV show situation is so backwards because so many times when I was watching the show last night, I caught myself thinking, man, the book doesn't do these characters justice, which doesn't make sense because the book came out first. So usually you would hear people saying that the movie or the show doesn't do the book justice, but I can honestly say that Netflix actually really improved not only the characters but the storyline in general. And I also think I realized why this book feels so much like reading fan fiction to me, because it honestly feels like I'm reading fan fiction for the TV show, because there really is not a good character introduction. They aren't really three-dimensional. There's also basically no, like, world building or descriptions in this book. Like, everything that I'm picturing in my head strictly comes from what I remember seeing in the TV show, because this just lacks in everything that has to do with any kind of depth or description or anything like that, which is not to say at all that fan fiction writers like lack in their abilities to write, but I feel like often, at least the fan fiction that I've read, it relies on the fact that you're already a fan of what you're reading. You're already familiar with the characters and the world that you're dealing with. So they tend to just kind of throw you into this story without a lot of like character introduction or things like that because you already are familiar with it. And that's how this book feels. Like, I honestly think had I not watched the TV show, I'd have DNF'd this book like 30 pages in, because it just really is lacking when it comes to the writing. But if I do have a positive thing to say about this book, and I don't know if it's just because I watched the TV show or not, but I do feel like the humor is getting a little bit better. The scene that I stopped in the middle of, which at this point we're over 100 pages in, I think we're gonna start including more spoilery things in this video, but the fake dating trope happened, which I'm gonna be honest, I totally forgot that that was a thing that happened in the TV show because I don't know that it lasted very long in the show, but I actually love the fake dating trope. So Daphne and Simon have made this agreement of their little fake dating, and so Simon comes to her house the next day with flowers that everyone kind of assumes would be for Daphne, but he gives them to Daphne's mother, and she is just like head over heels for these flowers and now for this man. And Anthony then shows up and he is not about it at all, but the mom is just like the snarkiness between her and Anthony and how she feels about Simon and stuff. It was actually kind of a humorous scene, so at least that is getting a little bit better as well. But yeah, that is what I'm going to be doing all this afternoon. I am hopefully going to enjoy it a lot better now, and I definitely feel more inclined to pick it up, like I said, once I actually put it down. So I am actually looking forward to reading it this afternoon. I think I'm probably going to go make myself another cup of coffee, and you may or may not be able to look forward to another coffee montage. So it is now a couple hours later, and I am 180 pages into The Duke and I kind of wanted to wait to update you until I was a bit farther into this book. However, there have been developments when it comes to my feelings towards this book. So I don't know how to say it, but I'm kind of really enjoying it now. Oh dear. Okay, so the best way I can explain like what happened to made these feelings occur is that I have talked about it before on my channel that I struggle like on the daily when it comes to reading books from the perspective of a reader, so somebody who loves to read books and reads them for the purpose of enjoyment and entertainment, versus reading them as a reviewer, as someone who reviews books and reads them for the purpose of doing that and thusly reads them from a very technical and critical perspective. And I really struggle to find a balance between those two mindsets. So yesterday, I think I really went into this book with just like 100% the reviewer mindset. Whereas last night, I started to drift more towards just the reader mindset. And then this afternoon, I think I just went full reader and I started to be able to really enjoy this book. Now, don't get me wrong, I still stand by a lot of the things that I said earlier. There's only like a couple of things that I would say have actually improved. Otherwise, I still don't think that this is like the best written book. But I do actually think the characters do have some more depth to them than I probably give them credit for. More specifically with like Simon's character and his backstory, I do think that actually does give him quite a bit of depth. But the other character that I also feel like I really note is the mom character. Like, I just feel like there's a lot more to her than what we're fully getting right now, but you can kind of see hints of her depth, and I kind of hope that at some point during the series we do get to hear a little bit more of her backstory and like how she met her husband, who at the beginning of this book had already passed. So yeah, I do think I have to give the book a little bit more credit for that than what I was doing before, and I also don't know if it's just because I am enjoying it more, but I do think the humor is getting a lot better in this book. And I also have to give the book credit for a scene that happens in here that I wish would have taken place in the show, and that is when they go on an outing together, the whole Bridgerton family as well as Simon, and they are boarding a boat when, due to the youngest Bridgerton brother, Simon and Anthony end up in the water and are like fuming. Meanwhile, the mom and Daphne are struggling to keep in their laughter, and I really liked that scene and I would have loved to see it play out in the TV show. But that being said, I do still feel like the TV show did a lot better at making the story a little bit more interesting. We definitely got to see a lot more of the Bridgerton siblings in the show, because I can't be the only one who thought that Eloise was like one of the best characters in the TV show, and as of almost 200 pages into this book, we have not gotten one scene with Eloise. Like, there have been scenes in which the whole Bridgerton family is present, and there was one scene in which they were having dinner and Simon couldn't tell if it was Francesca, I think is her name, or Eloise talking because he couldn't tell them apart. But other than that, we haven't gotten any of like feisty, sticks up for herself Eloise, and I'm a little disappointed in that. So yeah, those are my thoughts thus far. Like I said, I kind of wanted to be farther into this before I updated you again, but I thought this was a decent enough thing that I just wanted to talk about while it was on my mind. So yeah, I really think that is what happened, is that I just went from a very critical reviewer mindset to now more of I just want to have a good time while reading this book. So yeah, that is my update for now, and I might update you again tonight, or I might just update you again in the morning. So it is now the next morning, and I have just reached chapter 13 of The Duke and I, which I think is like 240 something pages into this book, so we have surpassed the halfway mark. Yes, I am using the receipt that I purchased this book with to use as a bookmark, but nonetheless, I am here to still tell you that I am having a fun time with this book, and I've been editing this vlog as I'm filming it, and like looking back on how much I was being critical on this book at the beginning, now I'm just like, you know, like, I don't have a degree in writing, so who am I to say that this book is badly written? Like, I'm having a good time reading it. Also, Daphne just threw her fourth punch, so that's a thing that's happening in this book. I also, for some reason, decided to look up when this book was written, because, like, I knew it's, like, an 8-book series, so I figured it had to be at least, like, 8 years old. Turns out this book was published the same year that I was born, which, for some reason, is just a really weird thing for me to wrap my head around, but alas, that is the only update that I have for you right now. I am still watching Bridgerton. I think I'm on, like, episode 3 now, and I'm thoroughly enjoying that also. The soundtrack to the Bridgerton TV show is so good. If you haven't watched it and you don't know what I'm talking about, they basically took like modern day pop songs but turned them into instrumental violin covers, and it is just lovely. The Wildest Dreams cover specifically by Taylor Swift, but is not by Taylor Swift because it's instrumental, is by far the best one, but the whole thing is just, it's very good. So it is now the next day. Sorry I didn't update you anymore yesterday, but I honestly didn't read it all yesterday, and I feel like this video is probably already getting kind of on the long side, so I don't really want to update you when I don't have anything worth saying. But it is now the next day, as I said, and I am on page 352 of The Duke and I, so I am nearly done with it. I think I have about 50 pages left until I get to the epilogues, which apparently my edition of this book comes with 2 epilogues. Unfortunately, I am here to say that my feelings towards this book has done another 180 as far as my enjoyment, and I am not enjoying it quite as much anymore. So from this point on, I will be talking about spoilers, as well as a trigger warning for what some might call lack of consent, and others might just straight up call the R word. So if you don't want to be spoiled for this book, and you're not comfortable with those topics, then thank you for watching this video up to this point, and I will see you in my next one. But if you are here to stick around, then let's talk about it. So, I have just read the scene. If you know, you know. So yes, I have just read the scene that officially labels this book for most as problematic, which is a shame because the scene itself doesn't make the book problematic, because I read so many books in which characters do bad things, but those actions are challenged, or the characters face consequences for their bad actions, and or it opens up a topic of conversation to talk about what was wrong in those instances, whereas this book doesn't do any of that, and thusly it turns a bad thing in a book into a problematic book. So because this book lacks the conversation around the topic in here, I thought I would take the time in this video to kind of discuss what happens in this book, how it's handled in the TV show, how I've seen it handled in other works, and what I think the author could have done differently. So I know that my opinion is probably going to slip into this part of the video, but for the most part, I want this to be more of like an observation for discussion rather than like my opinion on it. So yeah, let's begin. Now, like I said, this is going to include spoilers, and we've already gone over the trigger warning, so I assume that everybody that's watching has either read the book or seen the TV show. So just in case you've seen the show but you haven't read the book, I want to give you context to how it is set up in the book, because it is a little different to the TV show. And I just pray that none of my family is watching this video right now, because this is not something I ever thought that I would be explaining on the internet, and yet here we are. So to give you context to the story, Daphne and Simon are getting married under the understanding that Simon cannot have children. That is what he tells Daphne, and she agrees to marry him anyway because she loves him. Even though having children and a family was something that was important to her, she's willing to sacrifice that because she loves Simon. So they get married, they start doing the things that couples do, and Simon takes certain precautions, uses certain methods, if you will, to avoid children being a thing that could happen. And Daphne going into it with the worst birds and the bees talk ever. It probably isn't the worst. It was kind of similar to mine, but I had the internet and Daphne does not. So she has no idea what's going on, and she doesn't realize what Simon is doing is anything different to what any other couple is doing. But eventually Daphne does find out, and that is when she realizes that it's not that Simon can't have kids, it's that he doesn't want to. And she is very angry, very upset. Fair enough, I would be too, and I don't think what Simon did in this situation was right at all, and that in itself makes this relationship turn into something very unhealthy, but what Daphne does next does not make the situation any better. So Daphne confronts him about this, and they get into a big argument, and his stutter starts to come back. Again, I'm gonna assume you're familiar with that backstory if you're watching this part of the video, but his stutter starts to come back, and he ends up leaving and getting drunk, and when he comes back home, they do go to bed together, but halfway through the night, Daphne wakes up and realizes that he is drunk. He is still very asleep at this point, and she would be at an advantage being on top of him, and that is exactly what she does. She takes advantage of him. This is troublesome for obvious reasons, and I've read some reviews of other people talking about this, and there seems to be some people that are still up for debate as to whether this is problematic or not, and I don't know if those are the kinds of people that think that this is not something that can happen in the context of a marriage, which it definitely is, or if they just don't find it as bad because it's a woman taking advantage of a man. And I think most of us can agree that had the roles been reversed, this probably would have been a bigger deal than it is at the moment. For instance, I remember a couple years ago, Colleen Hoover wrote a book in which there was a scene where there was a lack of consent, and it was between a man taking advantage of a woman, and that's just what I heard. I didn't personally read the scene, but it became such a big deal that Colleen Hoover actually issued an apology and had the scene changed. So all of the books that were published from that point on had the changed scene, so it wasn't as bad as it was. Whereas this book, which was published over 20 years ago, it had plenty of time for someone to point out the fact that this is not a good thing, and they could have handled it in a different manner. But not only that, but then it was adapted into a TV show, because this scene does happen in the show. It's slightly different, but it still happens in the show. And whenever the author is questioned about it, she seems to try and justify it. And again, you can't quote me on this. This is more so what I've heard from other people. But it seems like she tries to really make Daphne seem like the victim in this situation because Simon lied to her. And again, I don't think what Simon did was healthy either. I think what he did was also problematic. But I don't think it makes sense that it's like, well, he did something bad, she did something bad, they cancel each other out, and the book ends in a nice little bow. Obviously, that's just not how it works, and that's not a healthy way to view it. And I do almost feel like the author, on purpose, tried to make Daphne seem more of the victim in this situation and tried to make you dislike Simon a little bit more. This is just like my personal opinion. Again, I said my opinion would slip through at some point, but like up until this point, I actually really liked Simon. Like, he was the more complex character out of all of them. I've established that I don't think this book is super well written, but I actually think he was a very complex character, and I liked him up until the point where obviously I knew, because I watched the show, I knew that he had lied to her, so that was icky. But up until literally the point where she confronts him about it, he suddenly does this 180 where he brings up multiple times the fact that because they're married, he owns her, and that was just very different to how he was before, and it just kind of felt like he repeated it so many times. It was almost like the author put it in there purposefully to make you dislike Simon so that when she takes advantage of him, you don't feel as bad. And there's even a line in here after the fact in which Daphne is thinking about what just happened, and she says she wasn't ashamed of her actions. She supposed she should be, but she wasn't. Now, the way that it's handled in the TV show is slightly different. I went back and I rewatched this particular scene, which is a weird scene to admit that I sought out, but it was for observational purposes. Well, that doesn't sound right either. Nonetheless, I went back and I rewatched the TV show, and in that particular scene, it is a little bit different because he's not drunk, nor is he asleep. He seems completely into what's going on up until the moment in which you can tell he wants it to stop. But by that point, it's already too late. Does that make it less problematic? My gut is telling me not really. I truly think a better way the author could have done this situation, which I still don't think would have been healthy. Like, we've already landed ourselves in an unhealthy relationship because of what Simon did, but the author could have avoided the R word being associated with her book had Simon kept doing what he was doing and Daphne got pregnant anyway, because the method that he was using, let's say, is kind of notoriously known to not be super effective. So that would just be one of the ways that we could have just avoided this situation. So those are my observations of this book. Was this a helpful or productive conversation? Probably not, but I still wanted to talk about it because it is a thing that happens in this book. So as you probably guessed, my enjoyment of this book has kind of gone way down because there is nothing fun or entertaining about what just happened. So we'll see how the ending goes, if it gets a little bit better for me, and maybe I can land on a higher rating, but at the moment we're more towards a 2.5, 3-star rating, so we'll just see how it goes. I do just want to establish, though, after everything that I just said, that I am not the kind of person that judges people based on the books that they read. I'm not the kind of person that's like, if you have read this book and you liked it or loved it, then that means you're a horrible person and you support what happened in this book. I'm not on that train, never been on that train, don't want to buy a ticket for that train. But all that being said, I still can't say that this is not a problematic book. So, those are my thoughts. I hope that I conveyed them well to you, but yeah, I'm just gonna finish the last like 50, 60 pages of this book, and then we will come back and wrap it up with my final thoughts. If this vlog is less than an hour long, I will be surprised. I have officially finished The Duke and I. As you can probably tell, it is a different day. I wanted to wrap this up last night, which is when I actually finished it, but instead I had a very scary encounter with a spider. If you follow me on Twitter, you might have heard what happened, but nonetheless, it's the next day, and I'm here to wrap up this book. In conclusion, I think, rounding up, I would probably give this book a 3-star rating. It's probably closer to something like a 2.75 because while there was a chunk of the middle of this book that I was having a really fun time with it, that just wasn't enough to make up for the problematic stuff that happens at the end of this book, and the fact that as a whole, I still stand by the fact that this book just isn't very well written. I think it completely lacks in any kind of descriptions or world building. This book is made up of 90% cheesy dialogue and 10% Daphne punching people. I also think there isn't a lot of character development or depth to the characters to begin with. The only character that has any kind of complexity to him is Simon, with the whole history of him growing up with his dad and having to deal with a stammer for not just his childhood, but it is something that he's conscious about throughout his whole life, and I think that that is lost a little bit in the TV show, which is a bit disappointing. But at times I almost felt like this book was more Simon's story than it was Daphne's, and it could be because the book does open with a prologue that is about Simon being born and then growing up, so it kind of sets up the book almost as if Simon is the sole main character. But even throughout the book, I felt like at times we were getting more of Simon's perspective on what was going on than Daphne's feelings about what was going on. But nonetheless, I think it just lacked all around when it came to the writing. Also, somehow this book came across feeling very fast-paced while still being like a 400-page book. It was just a little too fast at times for the stuff that happens in this book, and that's another way. My heat just turned on, of course. But I think that's one of the ways that Netflix did it a little bit better, because they broke up Daphne and Simon's story with these subplots that followed the other siblings, and I think that just was a better way to handle it. I think it made this story a little bit more interesting and it kept your attention a bit more, whereas in this book it's just a lot of Daphne and Simon, and I wanted to see the other siblings. And I'm gonna assume that season 1 of Bridgerton, while it does mainly follow this book, I'm pretty sure those subplots do come from the other books in the series. All of the subplots that happened in the Netflix show do not occur in the slightest in this book, which was a little bit disappointing, but that could just be because I watched the show first. Had I read the book first, maybe my thoughts would be different. But I guess that is the final question, is will I continue on reading the books? And I think I probably will pick up the sequel, which I think is called The Viscount Who Loved Me or something like that. I'm gonna get it from the library. I'm definitely not spending my money on that book, but I do just want to see if maybe the author's writing improves a little bit. I do also want to know what happens, because I don't want to have to wait until the second season comes out. But honestly, if the writing continues to be not very good and we continue to go down these paths of unhealthy relationships, then I probably will just DNF the sequel or stop after the second book, because in that case I would just rather wait for the TV show to come out. So those are my thoughts on The Duke and I. Leave me a comment down below. Let me know if you've read this book, what you thought of it, or if you've just seen the TV show and you're gonna stick with that route instead of taking a chance on reading this book. Let me know in the comments your thoughts. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!